cities have lost what's called the third space. Well, my name is Stefan. I'm the founder of a media company called Visegrad24, which is a new media company that is across social media, but it also has a website. We reach about 500 million people a month on average, and our main areas of focus are first and foremost the promotion of transcendental values, so that which is good, true and beautiful. And another area that we have focused on in the last 5 years since we launched the company with my brother has been to tell the stories of people who are being persecuted in one way or another. So we have done extensive amounts of work covering the silent genocide taking place in northern Nigeria, in which tens of thousands of Christians have been targeted, persecuted and murdered by Islamists. We have extensively covered the plight of the Venezuelan democratic opposition, which is fighting against Maduro and his communism. We have provided coverage for anti-communists in Cuba. We have worked alongside the Iranian diaspora, which is fighting against the Ayatollah and his mullahs that have turned Iran into an Islamist hellhole over the last several decades. And we have provided extensive coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine with many sources on the ground. We've been there repeatedly, and for the last 2 years we've provided extensive coverage of Israel's war with Hamas and of the rise of anti-Semitism across the Western world. And one of the other topics that we have focused on and off for many years has been the plight of Afrikaners and their struggle against, on one hand, an increasingly oppressive government that has gone from preaching the Rainbow Nation to essentially implementing a series of policies that make it incredibly difficult for the people who built this country to operate in it. And the other has been, of course, the defense of private property rights, and as such countering and telling the stories of farmers who are at risk of losing their farms due to land expropriation without compensation. And we've done a fair amount of work on that. We've interviewed survivors of farm attacks. We've interviewed survivors of random household break-ins in cities as well. And we've interviewed farmers at length about expropriation without compensation. And I think it's a really important topic. The story of South Africa is particularly relevant, despite my personal connection. My father is South African, of course. But despite whether I would have that connection or not, I think South Africa is a particularly interesting place for Westerners, and a particularly relevant one, because whatever is happening in the West is what can be described and has been aptly described by a chap called Will Tana as South Africanization. And what that means is the introduction on one hand of anarcho-tyranny, so misrule, not locking up criminals, in some ways even promoting them, and cracking down on the populace that is actually active, productive, and that does good things. The other thing, of course, is we are witnessing this in real time in the West, especially in Western Europe. We are witnessing a very rapid and very concerning demographic shift, in which millions of people, mostly from the global south and mostly from majority Muslim countries, be they Northern Africa, the Maghreb, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, or be they from the Middle East, in particular Syria, of course, to whom Angela Merkel opened the doors in 2015, declaring "Wir schaffen das." We have seen a rapid transformation of Western European cities. The majority of major cities, be it London, which is currently, according to the 2021 census, 37.5% white British, be it Paris, which has changed beyond recognition, Rome, Madrid, Barcelona, Berlin, we are seeing a process of what global elites would like to describe as multiculturalism, but is in fact nothing else than parallel societies. People who refuse to integrate, don't want to integrate, and you can see this in the population distribution according to boroughs or municipalities or neighborhoods. And this is a very concerning phenomenon, and I think South Africa is a warning to those who would pursue such policies of what inevitably happens. We have seen a very drastic increase in violent crime, in particular in major cities and Western capitals. We have seen a very, very concerning increase of sexual assault and rapes across Western capitals. And we have seen something perhaps that South Africa hasn't seen, but we are seeing, and it's a uniquely Western phenomena, a Western European phenomena, that is, we have seen aggressive Islamization through undercover organizations such as the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe or CARE in the United States of America. And this aspect of South Africanization, of becoming or being a minority in a country that is where you are surrounded by people who resent your success, who resent your past, who resent your history, who resent, rightfully or wrongfully, the difficult past. So in the case of South Africa, obviously apartheid, but following apartheid, the overrepresentation and success of Afrikaner and Anglo-South Africans. And the same way we're seeing horrific racial resentment in Western European countries. The United Kingdom obviously being blamed for its history of colonialization and its history of slavery. The same thing obviously occurs in Western Europe. But that race relation and race resentment, that difficulty in race relations and that difficulty in race resentment appears also in countries that have no history of colonization. I happen to be half Polish. Poland has seen a large wave of migrants, legal temporary workers that have been pulled in because of labor shortages that we face. We've had 30-something years of constant economic growth. Poland's now become $1 trillion economy. It's a place that many people want to live in. On one hand, Westerners who move there because it is safe, because it is still marginally cheaper, because it is possible to raise a family there, and it remains a stronghold of Christianity and of normal conservative values, of common sense values. And on the other hand, we've had large swathes of migrants and workers wanting to make money, mostly from former Soviet Union countries. And we are seeing a degree of this resentment, even though there is no history of colonization in Poland. Poland in the 19th century didn't even exist on the map of Europe. It was occupied for 123 years by the Russian Empire, by the Austrian Empire, and by Prussia. And it reappeared on the map of Europe in 1918 and never had any colonies. And even there, we see this very concerning resentment. And we're seeing this, I think there is an analogy to be made here with the way that Jews have been for many centuries resented for many of their successes, of being a minority that overperforms and overachieves. And white people today, we've gone from being about 30% of world population to being about 7% of the globe's population. And yet, Europeans and people of European descent have overwhelmingly overachieved and contributed to the world. And there is that analogy to be made that Jews who've been overly successful and who've done very well as a minority and have been persecuted for that as a result, we see that very same similar pattern emerge with the global South and its attitudes towards the Western world. And I think that's a very concerning thing. And I think it's a concerning thing with the demographic shift. And that is why I think South Africa is perhaps a cautionary tale for those in the Western world who are seeing these incredibly rapid demographic changes and what will inevitably occur. And one of the consequences, of course, of that in South Africa is if you go to any major South African city, what you will find is, on one hand, a very low trust society, which means people living on paper side by side, but fundamentally amongst each other. There has been no real integration. There is no real rainbow nation. And because it's such a low trust society and such a violent one with 50-something murders on average per day, it's one of the world's rape capitals. I mean, there's the overrepresentation in people using witch doctors over and above using a normal hospital, etc., etc., etc. As a result of all of this, you end up having people living in closed-off compounds. Cities have lost what's called the third space. So when people live, they have their personal space, their home, there where they are with their family. They have their workspace, and then you have the city's living room. What in Europe is usually a town square, it's charming cafes, it's bars, it's pubs, it's clubs. All of this is still open. You can walk through Florence in Italy and you can sit down in a cafe, and then you can walk across the street to a gelateria and have an ice cream. And you can live part of your life life out on the city streets alongside the rest of society. That aspect has completely disappeared in South Africa. There is no real third rim. All of it happens behind closed gates, all of it happens in compounds, all of it happens in locked away spaces. And this is something that will be replicated in Western Europe. Another phenomena that we are very likely to see emerging very fast is one of the greatest industries, the largest industries, one of the greatest employers in South Africa is the self-defense industry, the industry of hiring private security guards. It's apparently hundreds of thousands of people who are in that line of employment. This is also something that will emerge as the demographics inevitably shift against the favor of ethnic indigenous Europeans in favor of inhabitants of the global south. So these are all very concerning things. And South Africa is probably 20, 30 years ahead of the Western world in that. The United Kingdom, for example, is scheduled to be a minority white nation by 2063. Amongst those under 40 years old, that'll probably happen by 2043, which is firmly within my lifetime, and certainly within the lifetime of most of the people watching this video. And this is a deeply concerning thing, in which one is no longer the host or there's a great Polish word for this, the gospodarz, that the person who is the rightful owner of a place and who has guests. We will be essentially guests in our own countries, surrounded by people who not only don't share our values, our beliefs, our faith, be it Protestantism or Roman Catholicism, but added on top of that, actually resent us for our past, our history, and that which we have built. And so that's really the story of Visegrad 24 and of why Visegrad 24 has had an interest in South Africa. I hope that we played a small role, I believe that we did, in bringing the plight of the Afrikaner people to President Trump's attention. Certainly the videos and the clips and the interviews that we have shared over the years have gone very viral, and I think we probably played a small part in making sure that the US administration is interested in the plight of the Afrikaner people, who are an extraordinary people, very hardworking, very stubborn, incredibly resilient, and in some ways very similar to the Poles. So that's why I have an affinity, even though I am an Anglo-South African, I have a great affinity to the Afrikaner people.